Good evening, Virgin Islands, and welcome to another edition of the Power to the People radio show. I am your host, Senator at Large Angel Bolques Jr., and this show is a space where we continue to connect with the people directly. It's a platform where real conversations and updates are about issues that are affecting our daily lives. And the Power to the People radio show exists to inform you about the work that my office has been doing, our legislation, our public policies, community resources and opportunities that impact our families, our businesses, our seniors, and our youth. We will share the facts, highlight solutions, and bring together leaders, experts, and community members to move this territory forward. From economic development, housing, healthcare, education, agriculture, technology, public safety, good governance, and we are just here to support and build a stronger Virgin Islands together. This is all about unity. This is about progress. This is about putting people first. Again, my name is Senator at Large Angel Bolques Jr., and I have my co-host here with me, Ms. Ana Castillo and Judy Torres of my office. And this, again, is the Power to the People radio show. And today, we have a special guest with us here today, Mr. Carl Knight, the Chief Executive Officer of the Water and Power Authority. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing just fine. Good evening. Good evening to you, Senator Bolques, to your staff, to the listening audience. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I appreciate you taking the time out and being here with me today, with your busy schedule and all the work that you have been doing in the Water and Power Authority. I know it's not easy work. I know it's work that demands a lot out of you, and we appreciate all of the efforts that you put forward, even though at times, things may not go as planned and things happen, but that's just life, so I appreciate it.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that acknowledgement. Yeah, sometimes things don't go as planned. But that's the key. It's not what we plan. We are trying to do the best that we can. We're trying to deliver affordable, reliable power and water service. And sometimes things don't work out the way we'd like to see them work out, but that doesn't mean we're not trying to rectify those things. And we bust our tail every day to meet our mission.
And I would be the first to say that this is a collective effort. It's not just for you as a silo or working alone to accomplish. We as a government, we all parts thereof, have our responsibilities to include we in the Senate to be able to support not only departments and agencies and instrumentalities, but authorities such as yourself, even the Waste Management Authority and other authorities within the scope of this territory that require subsidy or support from time to time, because at the end of the day, what we're focusing on is a better quality of life for every single Virgin Island. And again, things may not pan out perfectly, but we all have our part to play in the grand scheme of things.
Oh yeah, I appreciate your perspective, Senator. That's exactly. I try to remind folks that this is your water and power authority. It is your public power utility, your water utility. It belongs to the people of the Virgin Islands, and we all have a vested stake and collective interest in making sure that it fulfills its mandate and performs the way it's supposed to. The employees that work at the Water and Power Authority, they live in this community. They are up and about amongst you. They are your friends, your neighbors, your classmates, your family. They're part of this community. They live here, and this is our asset. And so it's up to us collectively to do what we can to make sure that company, regardless of who's at the helm, that it provides the services that the people of the Virgin Islands require.
Totally agree with you. And I have a number of topics that I'd like to discuss with you. And of course, the listening audience will be obviously interested in. I wanted to start off with St. John, of course, where I reside. And, most importantly, the sheer fact that St. John is connected to St. Thomas by a transmission line. And we've had some issues there. And I'm obviously, thankful that we've had many discussions surrounding that issue. And obviously, as part of my responsibilities as a legislator, I have to go to the subject matter experts. People think senators know everything, but we don't. Okay, I'll be the first one to tell you. we have to go to the subject matter experts, the ones who are running the show in their perspective or respective areas, and understand the dynamics of how things need to be accomplished. And we need to learn from them in order to make a solution happen. And we've had CEO night, we've had numerous conversations around what potential solutions could come about in fixing the issue with the transmission line. And obviously, we were able to work together to do that with the help of my colleagues, and we were able to pass Act 9091, which is the submarine cable act between St. Thomas and St. John. So I wanted to get an update for those who are listening in the St. Thomas St. John district who would be more inclined to know where we are in that process, so that they would be able to at least understand how much more work is ahead and what has been done so far.
Yeah, certainly. I appreciate that, Senator. Not all help is helpful. Everybody said they want to help, but not all help is helpful. And sometimes, whoever you're trying to help, sometimes it's helpful to just listen to them and see what it is that can actually help move them forward. And so I'm grateful to you and your colleagues. I believe you were the prime sponsor on the legislation that provided us with funding, because there was a point in time when we had 3 transmission lines to St. John. Right now we're down to 1. And we actually took part of one and part of another to provide that service that we have to St. John right now as we speak. And so the repairs of those lines was not something that was within WAPA's budget. It's just something we hadn't anticipated doing. There was a belief that there was federal funding as part of the disaster recovery to do that, but that's not the case. We, at least currently, do not have any federal what they call project worksheets or FEMA grants designated for that purpose. So it required the local government to step in and secure the island of St. John. So the $2.1 million appropriated, I'm grateful to say we've already started to put it to good use. There is a small distribution line that runs between Ridge Road, Cabrita Point on St. Thomas, over to Cruz Bay. It can back up the whole of Cruz Bay, feeder 7E. And so we took an opportunity a few weeks ago. We had to take down the power to do some other repairs on St. Thomas. While we were over at St. Thomas doing that work, we had a crew over at St. John that tied in that cable to St. John. We tested the cable, so the submersed portion of the cable tested just fine. We tied it into the substation. We have Hogland VI right now as we speak. They're finishing up the tie-in on the St. Thomas leg. They have to run a few lengths of wire to get to the nearest connection point over on Ridge Road on the St. Thomas side of it. They're doing that work right now. WAPA provided the materials, and we actually had materials from another project, and we were able to expedite by using those materials because we have the funding to replenish and replace those materials thanks to the legislative act. So that work is underway, and probably I should have some really good news. Probably in the next week and a half, we should be complete, and certainly we will let the public know once we have produced that redundant backup to feeder 7E Cruz Bay. So that would mean that if for some reason we lost transmission along the main transmission line, we could maintain transmission to St. John through that feeder 7E distribution cable. We're working on another transmission line. So feeder 7E, that distribution line was damaged in the hurricane. There's a riser pole on the side of a cliff there on Ridge Road, and that was damaged during Hurricane Irma. Feeder, the main transmission line out at Great Bay near the Ritz-Carlton was damaged just a few years ago, maybe about 4-5 years ago now, maybe. They were clearing sargassum off the beach, and apparently they damaged the power cable going to St. John. The way it was designed, there was a cable at Red Hook and that cable out there at Great Bay, and it shared an equal amount of the energy flowing to St. John. So you never really burnt out one or the other because you had they both kind of shared the load. And of course, in an emergency, you could transfer all of the power to one or the other, which is what happened when that line got damaged. We transferred the power to the Red Hook line. The problem is we never, for whatever reason, came back and repaired the damaged line.
Right.
It is a little bit tricky. It is, when I saw the issue, the portion of the line that's damaged is in the water. So it's not like a regular splice. We would splice it. It's a submersible splice that you need because whatever you do when you join those lines together, it's one thing when the line is intact.
Right.
When you take the line and you have to splice it, and this is high voltage, and then you put that in the water, well, you're floating with danger unless you do it the right way. So there's something called a submersible splice. They might refer to it as a coffin box. It's literally a box, so you splice it within this waterproof enclosure, this box. It looks a little bit like a coffin, and that's what that's how you repair that line. But we also have fiber because although the power portion of the cable was damaged, that cable was a dual cable that has telecommunications as well as electricity. The telecommunications to St. John are being served by that same damaged line. So the fiber is intact. The copper for the electricity is what was damaged.
Okay.
So to make that repair, you now also have to repair the fiber optics as well. A decision was made. We started to move, full board to make the repair, and then I don't know who I give the credit to, but somebody rightfully suggested that we just move that cable, so it's not on the beach anymore. It's not in the way, harm's way of the Sargassum.
Right.
And there's a point that kind of juts into the ocean very nearby, and a decision was made to just relocate that cable. We are working with so that was a little bit of a change of scope. We have a contractor that was ready to do the splice, so he's still on board. A local contractor, electrical conductors, they're going to do that work for us. We're talking to another contractor, Vivo, that has the barge with the crane that can actually relocate the cable, and we're working with him to get a quote on what that's going to cost. And so we're going to try and relocate that. We've already started to seek the necessary permissions, and it does two things. One, it moves it out of harm's way, but then when we splice it, that splice is going to remain on land. It's not going to be submersed into the ocean. And of course, if it was to ever fail again for any reason, it'll be a much easier repair because we won't have to go into the water to repair it. So we are working on that as well. So Ridge Road is coming up for us. That's going to back up Cruz Bay. But when we get the Great Bay line repaired, hopefully in the next couple of months, that's going to back up the whole of St. John. Okay. And so we would have restored some redundancy in multiple ways for the island of St. John.
Okay. And that's good and great news. And speaking of great news and good news, as of late, you have 4 new Cummins generators that are going to be coming to St. John at some given point in time to provide 10 megawatts of capacity. And for those who are listening, St. Croix, don't worry, we're going to get to you. But for those who are listening, one of the main issues, especially for St. John, is that we're tied into St. Thomas. So, as an example, if something happens in St. Thomas, the whole entire island of St. John goes down for whatever reason. Obviously, the CEO can be more specific as to which generator or whatever, but the point is that we don't have a generator on the island of St. John. So with this new addition to the inventory of the Water and Power Authority, they'll be able to provide some additional generation. And I think the CEO can elaborate a little bit more better than I can. If you could explain to them what's going to happen once the new generators reach, when will they be installed? Is there a scope of a certain month or so that we will be able to see that these all come online?
Oh yes. So that's definitely that was my news of the week. I got more news. Things are really good news. Okay. Not good news. Things are starting to pick up, and so we have been working on those generators for quite some time. We had found some Caterpillar engines that we were trying to procure. I heard my customers and my stakeholders requesting that we get new engines for the island of St. John. So we went back to the drawing board and we found ourselves 4 brand new Cummins engines. Each of them is 2.5 megawatts, a total of 10 megawatts. 2 are slated for Cruz Bay. We have a public, government-owned site that we are going to be utilizing to put those down in Cruz Bay, in Coral Bay. And then we have the Frank Bay substation. It's going to be a tight squeeze, but there's the old water plant building we're about to demolish, and we're going to make room to put in these 2 generators there. Okay. They're fully enclosed. They're The enclosures are rated to withstand hurricanes. So we're going to have 5 megawatts in the Cruz Bay area, 5 megawatts in the Coral Bay area. I'm pleased to say that those generators finally boarded the ship. I think earlier this week. They're slated to arrive. It was supposed to be the 23rd. They did tell me plus or minus, so they're now telling me the 24th. I'm trying to track it to tell you exactly where it is, but they are boarded and making their way to St. Thomas. We're going to land them in St. Thomas while we continue to prep on St. John for their installation. And when we're ready, we'll move them from St. Thomas over to St. John. So we are looking forward to taking delivery of those generators next week. And I don't know what happened in the past. You know, everybody asks me, but what were the generators that were supposed to come? And I don't know, Senator. I don't. I've heard.
No, that was before your time.
It was before my time. I've heard three different versions of the story, and I just can't vouch for exactly what happened, why it happened, and why the generators never arrived. What I could tell you is that we have generators on the way. I've secured those. I've heard the folks on St. John asking for the ability to have a little bit of independence from St. Thomas, and we're answering the call. So we're delivering generators to St. John. To your point, though, it's a benefit to both St. Thomas and St. John, because if I ever have capacity shortfalls like I've been having in the last few months since our generators have been having their maintenance issues, that is 10 megawatts that I can supplement the Harley plant with. They are standby generators, so they're only meant to operate if we lose the grid, that connectivity between St. Thomas and St. John. If Harley plant goes down or St. Thomas just can't produce power to get to St. John, at that point the standby generators would automatically kick in. We could control them from the Harley plant, but they would be in standby mode, ready to go if needed. If they're not needed, they'll stay off. In the event of a prolonged outage, we'll run them as long as we need to run them. They come with a 24-hour built-in storage tank, and we're going to supplement that with some additional diesel storage at those two sites, so that if we have an event, like God forbid a hurricane or something like that, we can use those generators to keep St. John powered while we work on the St. Thomas grid.
Okay, so as a simple example, for instance, I'm not sure which unit, but the unit that runs Red Hook, because I'm assuming that's where the transmission comes from, right?
Yeah.
If that unit goes down, then the generators in Cruz Bay and Coral Bay will immediately. How does that work?
So there's two things that could happen.
Yes.
You can have a generation outage all the way in the Harley plant in Crum Bay,
right,
meaning that we just can't produce the power. So we have, let's say we're rotating power, we just have an island-wide blackout. I mean, St. John is out of power too, or at some point we'll be out of power. If I'm rotating, when it comes to St. John's on, I could skip the rotation because St. John has its own power source.
Right.
If we have an island-wide outage, I can keep St. John powered up while we work out whatever is happening in St. Thomas. The other thing that could happen is something happens on the transmission or the distribution system. So something happens between that eastern substation there by Nazareth, and we can't transmit power for whatever reason, or maybe it's the line, God forbid something else happens to the transmission or the distribution line, the undersea cable. St. John would have the ability to produce its own power on site for as long as it needs to, until we can get whatever repairs or rectify whatever the situation is. So it gives St. John some additional redundancy, and it gives it its own power source. The ultimate plan is to make that part of a microgrid that would include a solar farm and battery energy storage. And so the idea really is that at any point in time, the term they use in the industry is called islanding. Of course, we live on an island, so it get confusing, but islanding essentially means we can separate from the grid and run St. John for a period of time on its own without needing to be connected to the grid. My goal is shooting for at least 7 days, at least 1 week, where St. John can independently power itself for at least a week before it has to tie back into the St. Thomas grid. So we're trying to create that microgrid that if push comes to shove, St. Thomas could be on its own, St. John could be on its own for a week without needing to tie into Harley.
And for the listening and viewing audience, just so that everyone knows, the last time we've had a generator on the island of St. John, and my math might not be specific, but I graduated from Julius East Proud School in 1993 to go to Idora Ken, And prior to 1993, somewhere in the earlier 90s, the Green Hornet stopped from operating on the island, from what I'm aware of. And so we've not been tied in we've not had independent generation on the island, at least back to the early 1990s. So I recall that as a youngster.
Yeah, no, that sounds like the right time frame. I think that's the correct time frame. The I've heard stories that it was operable after that, but I don't think we operated, and I think a lot of that had to do with EPA restrictions. Those machines back then were not necessarily environmentally friendly.
True.
They were using what we call 6 oil, heavy bunker C crude oil. And I think part of the downfall of the Green Hornet ultimately was EPA air emission standards for the island of St. John. St. John is considered pristine air quality, and you gotta be very careful with what you operate there. That's why I'm very careful in saying these are standby units, because the permitting, if they're going to be running 24/7, 365, the permitting for those would be a lot different.
Okay.
The fact that they're only to operate in an emergency is why the permitting is a little bit more forgiving, right? We had some issues with oil spills out there, so even when I wanted to put down or use that site, I do have oil contamination. I think the fuel storage tanks were leaking at some point. So it became a little bit of an EPA environmental mess out there with the Green Hornet. I think that's why the use of it was discontinued.
And I just wanted to put that on the record because I want the listening audience, because we got people from St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John listening, and I just want them to understand that we in St. John have not been able to have any independent generation from then until now. So this is big news. This is a big news for the island of St. John.
This is a big thing. So, I'm very proud to be able to do this. We met with the residents of St. John, and I heard them loud and clear. So I'm very happy to be able to do that.
They were very loud.
Yes, they were very loud. St. Croix also we used to step children, but then I got over there and I saw our step siblings. Yeah. So John was
I must say, CEO Knight, you are definitely a gentleman, and you handle yourself very professionally. So I appreciate your professionalism and how you handle situations like that. Not everyone can do that. I must say that I admire the way that you handle.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Let's just switch over now. So we've talked about the transmission line work that's being done. We're talking about the generators that are coming to St. John online. You have a quick question about St. John?
What are the name of the generators coming to St. John?
Cummings is the name of the
Cummings.
The manufacturer.
Cummings. Okay, the manufacturer. Okay, thank you.
Matter of fact, I saw like Gallows Point has a Cummings. There's a few of those already on the island, smaller. These are a little bit larger. But it's a brand that we're familiar with, and Cummins is an American-made brand. So it's if you're worried about parts and all of that stuff, there are a lot of distributors in the region. It's a very popular brand.
How about warranty?
They do come with a warranty. I can't remember offhand. We purchased them a few months ago, but they do come with a warranty. I think it's like a 5-year warranty or something like that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Like I said, they're brand new, so they come with a manufacturer's warranty. And then there's an installer's warranty where they warranty the work for at least a year. So the manufacturer warranties that the engine will run properly, and the installer has to guarantee at least for a year that they have installed it properly, and it's going to commissioned and it's working the way it's supposed to.
So they're going to install it.
We have a contractor called RG Engineering. They have been doing the disaster recovery generation work for the Office of Disaster Recovery on behalf of WAPA. And they're going to install it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Torres. Let's shift over to energy grade battery storage, right?
Okay.
Renewable energy, for those listening. So we see and have seen the expansion of solar and battery storage in the island district of St. Croix. So hence you're seeing less power outages or less reasons to shut off power when in fact you could switch over to the grid and be able to conduct routine maintenance if necessary, because you now have solar and battery storage in the island district of St. Croix. So St. Croix, you're very lucky for that, at least for that. We definitely see the big difference between the districts. We did approve, as the legislature did approve, the solar out in
Fortuna.
Fortuna.
And, I think
Boboni as well.
Yes.
Those two solar projects. So we're just hoping and praying that those projects come online sooner than later. Can you give us a little update on when those will come online for St. Thomas?
So I spoke to the developer up to this morning. He is moving. He said he secured the funding to purchase all of the remaining materials that he needs. He started putting up the racks, and I think he had to pause while he secured further financing. He told me as of this morning that he secured everything that he needs to secure. He is closing on some financing, but he started talking about the commitment he had made is about 10 megawatts before the end of the year. He's still working towards that. He hasn't told me that that's not happening. So I continue to, the countdown is about 4 months to go. So I'm watching very carefully to see if he can really pull it off. But he's pushing to get his project moving. I'm excited about that opportunity because, again, on the island of St. Croix, I've seen the benefit of those utility scale solar farms as well as the battery storage that comes along with them. And I've seen how it has really helped stabilize a very precarious situation at St. Croix. I don't think people realize, even right now, I'm really down. I have 2 generators that WAPA owns on St. Croix that are operable today, right now. I have one that we have in standby mode. We don't want to use it unless we have to because it's time for it to get some serious maintenance done. So we are trying to queue up that maintenance. I do have the benefit of the Grecos that we lease. But during the course of the day, about half of our power generation is coming from the solar farm. And we're able to, between the Grecos, we start a generator, but we really don't use a lot of that energy. So we save on that fuel and whatnot. Because once the sun is up, we have pretty good solar resource, and it has made a real big difference. There was so much skepticism when I came into the company. I made all kind of studies saying this ain't gonna work and you're gonna lose money and so my thing was, again, execute. Let's get it done. I don't know what conversations were before I got there, but let's get it done. And I'm really pleased to say it's working exactly as we had expected it to work. Matter of fact, it has more capacity. One of the conversations we're having is the batteries have more capacity than we've been using. So now we're looking to see how we can maximize that battery capacity. We actually was looking at how much of the batteries we use on a daily basis. They kind of come in, the batteries we use, so if a cloud kind of comes, you get a little bit of cloud cover, the battery will kick in to keep the production the same. But what we're really trying to do is charge those batteries and into the night discharge them so that we get the benefit of our solar resource. Even after the sun goes down, we get 2-3 hours of solar after the sun goes down. So we're actually setting up a conversation with the solar farm owner to really talk about how we can maximize the benefit of the battery resource. So it's a real good thing. It's indigenous fuel. I don't have to wait for a tanker to come with it. It's right here. And as I tell him, back before we had the 2 more recent solar farms, we had the one at Spanish Town, Estate Prophet. And I used to say, once the sun rises in the morning, that solar farm gonna rise too. So the sun never rises. Yeah. We got bigger problems than a solar farm. But once the sun rise,
lately we've been getting a lot of sun this summer.
Oh, we're getting too much.
if you can just sort of explain to me just when the Fortuna and the Boboni solar farms come online, right? In addition to the solar farms that exist on St. Croix, then your entire grid for the Virgin Islands would obviously now see some sort of, for the lack of a better term, balance between the both districts. Because right now you got more solar over here, but you're still gonna have to eat the cost on the other side because you're having to burn more fuel and do other things. So theoretically speaking, what would that mean for the authority? Would that mean that you're in a better place to look at rates? Would that mean you're in a better place for more production? What would that mean for you?
It means both, right?
Okay.
Right now I'm using more diesel in St. Thomas than I would like to, and diesel is very expensive. Until we figure out what's going on with the Strait of Hormuz, the diesel prices are just killing us. And I worked really hard to try and eke out a little bit of savings, and I saw it all evaporate between February and now because the cost of diesel in particular. Propane has gone up too, but just not as fast and as much as the diesel costs. And so that's our mission right now, is to get off of diesel. We actually had a period last year, January 2025, for about 3 weeks. We were 100% LPG propane operation in St. Thomas, and life was great. And then we had some issues with the Watsilas, and we just haven't been able to get back to that point. But I know we can get there because we were there already. So we're going to get back there. We're going to find our way back to 100% LPG operation. But having the extra solar gives us some capacity. I've been talking about some concepts and ideas that I know. My job, I got to stay 2-3 steps ahead, right? Once I see the problem, today's problem being solved, I'm moving on to start thinking about tomorrow's problem, right? I don't stick around watching today's problem solved, because that's what the guys do. They're working on today's problems. I got to be 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps ahead. So I'm looking at the extra capacity. I'm looking at the cruise ships coming into the subbase, even to Frederickstead, and realizing that, with that extra solar, if I get a big behemoth like Unit 23 back in service, I got the solar, I got new generators coming, I actually get to a point where I have enough capacity to be comfortable, and even enough capacity to start to sell a little extra to the cruise lines. Cruise lines want to be able to turn off their engines when they're in port. Matter of fact, some of them have maritime treaties that they've signed saying that they are going to buy green energy, they're going to turn off their engines, they're going to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. We can help them with that. We're going to have a lot of solar
That would be
that
wonderful.
we can actually help them with. That's more sales for the authority. That doesn't have to come out of the pockets of the people of the Virgin Islands.
Right.
That helps lower rates. The price we're getting for the solar is much cheaper than I could produce it. Probably even with the units that we're bringing in, it's still very hard to beat the 11 cents contracts that I've signed. And when we draw power from the battery, any power discharge from the battery comes to us at 5.5 cents. We have 2 meters on those solar farms in St. Croix, one on the solar farm, one on the battery. If you discharge from the battery, that's 5.5 cents a kilowatt hour, and from the solar farm is 11 cents. When I get that nice blended rate across the territory, that means a real difference in what we can charge our customers. It really allows us to bring down the rates, and it also gives us extra capacity. We don't win twice, and that's not very far off. I mean, it's tantalizingly close to being realized. I'm hoping that by this time next year we're having a different conversation, because I think things are almost there.
Most definitely. I'm an advocate for green energy. Have been for many years. Matter of fact, before you came into this capacity, I set up a meeting with the then chair of the board of WAPA and the then CEO, your predecessor. And at the time I had a phone call with you, and remember that phone call that I was he was supposed to come, but he didn't make it.
Oh, okay.
So something happened.
I'm a big believer in renewables. We have 2 power purchase agreements signed for wind, right? So it's not just solar. Advanced Power has a PPA they signed with WAPA, precedes me. And they have one for Bavonia, and they have one for the South Shore of St. Croix. And both public government-owned land that I think they've leased, and they've secured the leases. They claim they've secured their financing. The Trump administration did give them a little run for their money, but they told me that they've navigated those things. And my biggest problem with them is, at the time when they signed the PPA, I really needed the power. Now that I've built these solar farms, there might have to be a conversation about cutting back the size of their wind farms, because again, we're looking at a situation. I don't want to agree to purchase power that I don't need. So, but that we actually have a PPA to do wind, and I'm actually trying to negotiate one. We've been very distracted, but we have an offer for a waste to energy facility. There's a waste energy company that has gone through the Public Services Commission. They're seeking to do a small pilot project on St. John to do about 1 megawatt of energy, and that would take care of St. John's solid waste, prevent that having to ship it over by barge to Bavoni. They would be able to, they think they can take all of St. John's waste and produce about 1 megawatt of power. I said the megawatt of power ain't going to do me a big difference, but certainly if it can be a solid waste solution, and if we could do that scale, then we know that it could work on St. Thomas and St. Croix. So you can make it work in St. John, then we know it can work on the other two islands. So we're going to we are at the point of negotiating an interconnection agreement,
Nice.
and that pilot project I think would be very exciting. We have a real solid needs problem in the territory and
Mhm.
on all three islands, and if this can work, we'll embrace that as a solution because I think ultimately indigenous sources of fuel that doesn't require tankers and ships to sail from on far to reach to us, that's where we need to be going.
And you know, when we talk about solar and wind and the equipment required to actually pull it off, most people are going to be thinking of a question, and the question is, well, when the hurricane come, what will happen? And so for the solar panels and the equipment that you have, they're rated at what hurricane rating?
The ones they're probably all by now at like 185 miles per hour.
Mhm.
I think they used to do them at like 150. But I want to say a few things. So one, first off, is those power purchase agreements we sign. It's really not our problem. They don't belong to the Water and Power Authority. We buy the power, and so like when Dunu got destroyed,
Mhm.
we basically said, well, when you rebuild it, let us know. We didn't lose any money. Um, they had their insurance, so they have to insure them. But it's really not a liability. So it's not like WAPA's equipment or the people of the Virgin Islands equipment is being destroyed. These are privately owned properties, and we so that's the first thing. The liability stays, the risk and the liability stays with the solar farm owner. But having said that, Dunu got destroyed in Irma, but Spanish Town went through Maria with no problem.
True.
What we have learned is, the way you rack it, the quality of workmanship. Toshiba built that farm in St. Croix. There was a company named Lancoast that built the farm in St. Thomas. Well, clearly there's a difference between the work Toshiba did and the work that Lancoast did, right? I've seen a nice farm, a small farm out there by the RT Park on St. Croix. I mean, it's so low to the ground, almost hugging the ground. It's really a smart design, anchored into the concrete there. So it's anchored into the concrete. Well done. I've seen the farm built out there at Hoggensburg on St. Croix. I saw the pull testing where they basically put a machine to try and pull the racks out of the ground. And it's these are really well built. I think we've learned some things. People talk to me about the district court on St. Croix. That stuff was very flimsy. That racking was very flimsy. The workmanship makes a difference. And I think what we have insisted on with the most recent projects and projects moving forward is that you have to make the investment into quality workmanship to secure your farms. And there's, like I said, Spanish Town went through Category 5 hurricane, and you barely lost a panel. So we know that good workmanship works.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can we go back to St. John? The
Oh, sure.
pilot with the
Yeah. Waste energy?
recycling?
Yeah.
Yes. When is that supposed to happen?
So they actually they would like it to happen yesterday.
All of us.
Realistically, we probably spend the rest of the year working through the legalese and all the other stuff that's involved in negotiating that kind of an agreement. I've already agreed we'll buy it at or below our avoided cost. It's not a lot of haggling on my part. I did suggest to them that the Waste Management Authority need to put a little skin in the game.
Hmm.
So that's my little holdout in my negotiations. But I imagine sometime next year we should start to see some movement on that project.
Good.
They're very eager, and I don't want to lose that opportunity.
Good. Thank you.
Shifting over to St. Croix again, the Christian town has been having some, I guess, some periodic on a periodic schedule, I guess.
No, in the last couple of days.
Yeah,
It's going on 5 days now.
5 days.
Yeah, no, that's not periodic.
No.
We had an issue. We had an outage. I think it was Saturday morning or sometime thereabouts, and it did take out feeder 1A, which is the town of Christian said. We restored the power, but there was a small section that didn't get completely re-energized. What it is we have most of Christian said. Good thing is underground.
Okay.
We have what we call submersible transformers. So these are not the pole mounted transformers. These are transformers that go into a manhole. They're buried and they're actually meant to, sometimes we get water in those manholes. They're actually meant to be able to operate while submerged, right? So these are different types of transformers. One of those went bad, and so there are several businesses in Christiansted Town that are experiencing partial power.
Yes.
Right.
So they have power for some portions of the business, and they're 120 appliances, but anything that requires 240 volts and
Phase two.
you're right,
Two phase. Sorry.
two-phase power is not not operable properly. So any heavy equipment, maybe freezers and I don't know, pumps, those sort of things, they're having issues with. We thought we had it repaired last night. So we worked through the night. We took off. In order to work in the manhole, we have to take off the power on the feeder. That's the unfortunate thing about underground work. We can't work in a manhole with energized lines around us. We just
Dangerous.
I think it's impossible. I think so. Overhead, you can actually do it. We can work hot with the right sleeves and insulation. You can actually work near energized lines and not kill yourself. But when you go down inside a manhole, I don't think there's any means of maneuvering that is considered safe. So we do have to de-energize. We took off the power last night quietly, and we replaced the transformer, but we replaced it with we couldn't find the right size transformer, the 75 kVA that they need. We put in a 50 kVA. We energized this morning. We thought everything was solved, and then I got word sometime in the late morning hours that the power was off again. We haven't been able to source the right size 75 kVA transformer, submersible. We have different types of transformers, but we just don't have that one in stock right now. Those guys are working on a alternate solution. Spent all morning. I put my brightest minds together to try to figure out how we're gonna do this. I gave my ideas. My ideas were dumb and silly, but they came up with an idea that's much better. And so, because we had two phases working, and I was trying to figure out how can we energize that third phase that's off. But they're going to use a pad mount transformer, a surface mounted transformer. They're going to put it over the manhole. They're going to bring the wires up into the surface mounted transformer, and we're going to use that as a temporary fix until we can get in the right transformer.
Is that transformer? It's not in the road or anything like that. So
I actually have to go out and see exactly where we're going to put the physical transformer. From what I understand, we'll have to put barricades around it.
Okay.
So that tells me that it's in a road or in a parking area or something. I got to see exactly what they're proposing. They should have started moving the cranes and stuff in place
until we get the actual.
Until we get the proper size transformer for that purpose. So we have in that manhole we have 100 kVA, a 75 kVA. We needed another 75 kVA. That's the size of the transformer, and we just couldn't source one that is capable to be submerged. So we're working on that. We've made some phone calls, PREPA, BVI. We're calling around the place if somebody has one in stock that they can get to us quickly, and that will. But in the meantime, we think we're going to do this jerry rig fix. We're going to work around the clock all night if we have to. And our mission today, we're working today, and we're hoping that by tomorrow morning, the latest, we will have them energized. It won't be a permanent fix,
Right.
but it will get them back to normal operations until we could get the permanent fix. There's a lot of rumors and all that stuff and speculation, but that's what happened. We didn't have the right size transformer. We put in a smaller one. We thought that would have fixed the problem. We were hesitant because we knew we had to take down the town to do that work, so we took it down last night.
Yes.
But then when we put in that transformer, it blew again. So we lost a really good transformer because it was undersized for the mission. We're going to rectify that.
I'm actually part of the Christian Shed chat.
Okay.
And I notified everybody, and they notified us this morning that it was still down.
It came up for a while because I got folks thanking me, so I felt good. She went to St. Thomas today thinking, okay, all right, everything is good. And then, around 11 a.m., folks were asking me what's going on. And I was like, what do you mean? We fixed that some 5 o'clock this morning. That was odd. But apparently we lost it at some point this morning. So, it's very frustrating. I know. I apologize to our customers.
Thank you for that.
And it's been very tricky to kind of communicate to them because, sometimes we need to kind of understand what's happening and, 5 o'clock in the morning, we had a fix, and to
Right.
try to figure out what we couldn't do. We figured the transformer blew because the only way to test it would have been to turn off the power again, and that would have
That
put the
would
rest
have
of
been another
town back
problem again.
right. That would have
Right.
put the rest of town back in jeopardy. So we just started working on Plan B, and we assumed the transformer has failed, and we just started working on Plan B. So
Thank you for that.
Thank you. And I was out at the Vincent Mason pool this afternoon. The St. Croix Happy Retirees, they have like every third Wednesday they have a little meeting or a little potluck or whatever. So
Potluck.
I went out
that's what I
there
have to look forward to.
Yeah, yeah, man. It was fun. It was fun. And I just wanted to send out a good evening to the St. Croix Happy Retirees. Make sure you have the word happy,
Happy
in there.
retirees.
Happy retirees.
I
And
don't
they
want happy one.
definitely
These
were
are
happy.
happy ones.
They were happy, very happy. And one of the things that I spoke to with one of the retirees, Mr. Edwards, which I told him about the show this evening, and hopefully he's tuning in and hearing this conversation. But he was curious about the composite poles, the installation of the composite poles for the rest of the island moving further out west. So he mentioned that there's a lot installed in the east, and they were wondering what are what are the plans to continue installation of composite poles in the west.
So I don't know if he should be happy or unhappy. The composite poles were installed in the east for one basic reason. The farther east you go, the less dense the population becomes. And the real logic behind the composite poles was to put it in those rural, less populated areas so that in the event of a disaster where we need restoration, there's not a lot of resources and manpower that has to be expended in those less populated areas. So, if I send a crew and they work all day, but they only pick up 50 houses, that's a very slow restoration. So the thought process was like, look, let's try and harden those areas so that we could send the crews to the places where they would have the most impact. And what we were doing with those other areas is burying the lines. So in the more densely populated areas, we have focused more on undergrounding. So there is a underground project that is there's one that's supposed to start here at Welcome and go all the way along the north side to Lorraine, come around and come out at Lorraine intersection. And then there's one that's supposed to pick up from Lorraine intersection and go all the way to Frederickstead. A portion of it has already been done, where we buried the lines between Central High School and basically the not chicken shack, the Spicy Grill, that intersection there by the Agriculture Fairgrounds, right just after the complex. So we've actually created a loop that goes from there, it goes up through Golden Grove Park onto the highway, up to the substation where the solar farm is, back along cross Central High School. It actually makes a complete loop underground, right? So we've been moving.
Okay.
And the plan is to pick up from there and head to Frederickstead. That's part of those ODR bundles that they've been talking about. Now, I've heard that because of inflation, the cost of burying the lines is escalating while we're talking, the price going up. And so there will be some sections where we do composites. So there will be some sections maybe going into the west where we pick it up with composite poles just as a cost saving measure. They're a little bit less expensive than burying the lines. But the plan really was for most of the western side of the island to really do undergrounding as opposed to composite poles. So
Okay, so for clarification, Mr. Edwards, if you're listening, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to install composite poles, but it's highly likely that they're submerged or buried.
our preference for the west
power
is to bury the power lines.
And actually, that's more efficient at the end of the day because the hurricane doesn't necessarily get to those underground lines.
So forget about hurricanes, right?
Yeah.
Almost every other week, somebody will crash their car into one of our poles.
Yeah. You're right.
That too.
Yeah, I mean the poles. People crashing the poles. We had one in Morningstar the other day. Create havoc for like 2 days.
I remember.
They crash. I mean, I don't know how they wrap themselves around that pole. But then you also have branches in the lines. You have lightning strikes. You have all sorts of hazards that can affect overhead lines. When we bury them, you don't have those hazards.
Agreed.
And so that's the
Agreed.
benefit.
So let's switch over to water, the other
Yes.
side of your authority. I know that in St. Thomas there's 22% line loss, and I know it's larger over here in St. Croix.
Mhm.
And we want to know what efforts the authority is looking at right now to try to, bring that number down in a sense, because obviously you're bleeding water money, if I could put it that way.
Yeah, no,
You know,
it's the lowest hanging fruit for the authority. All my temper tantrums in the world don't fix the problem, but I keep reminding them that I pay for that water,
Mhm.
and half of it goes into the ground, especially on St. Croix. And if I could sell that water to customers that desperately want to buy it,
Yes.
it would change our financial situation in a very significant way, right? So, unfortunately, so I have to say this. I've known this. I worked for WAPA in the mid '90s into the early 2000s, and even back then, we hardly used to get much money to rehab water lines. That was like a little trickle every now and again. You got a little EPA grant, and you're glad because you could fix one little line here, one little line there. You barely got any money to expand the system.
Mhm.
The federal government just doesn't give a lot of grants, or didn't traditionally give a lot of grants. During COVID, they gave a lot of money for expansion and rehab. And then with the disaster, we got a lot of money for rehab. So we have lines, like I joke, there's a couple lines in St. Thomas that are older than my oldest employee, right? So and I joke about that, but it's real. We have lines that, I mean, they're shot. That line on the waterfront in St. Thomas,
Mhm.
it's dead. That line, if we fix it here, in 2 weeks it's gonna break up the road. I mean, the metal, it's an iron pipe, and the iron has corroded to the point where it's paper thin, right? So only the shape is carrying the water at this point. It's a really compromised line. Here on St. Croix, the same thing. We got lines, running along Center Line Road on St. Croix that Queen Mary almost came and meet them there because they're that old. And so the answer is we have to replace them. We've done a lot of that work. Most recently, we just wrapped up last year or earlier this year at Campo Rico and Hannah's Rest. We changed out those lines. We're moving from iron pipe. We no longer do iron pipe. We do PVC. And so we've changed all of those out to PVC. We've done it in Christiansted Town. Bit by bit, say profit, we've changed out those lines. Bit by bit, we're replacing water lines. The old iron pipe that is rusting away, we're replacing that with PVC pipe. The bundles, the ODR bundles, has a lot of that work built into it. It's a one dig. So they have spent a few years really coordinating an effort to say when we dig these roads,
Thank God.
everything is going to go in one time.
Thank
And when we
goodness.
pave the road, they're going to be paved, right?
Yeah.
It's
Done
not
and done.
WAPA going to come in and dig, and then waste management will come after us, and then VINGN will come cut a trench to run their fiber, and it has taken us a while to get these off the ground. I know contracts are now in place, the design work is being done, but it's a one dig policy. And when we start to replace those lines, you're going to see a difference in water quality,
Mhm.
and you're also going to see, of course, line losses are going to be reduced as well.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that because I don't know for those who are listening out there if they've been keeping up with what's going on in Puerto Rico.
Yes.
Puerto Rico has an island-wide drought due to the very, very aged water infrastructure, and the government has now gotten to the point where they're shutting off water at certain hours of the day.
I think every 2 days, every 48 hours, they actually cut off the water.
And what happens is that you would have to fill up all your buckets and whatever it is that you think you might need for those outages, if we can call them that, because they're shutting off the water because they are experiencing very large line loss due to the very, very aged infrastructure of the water lines in Puerto Rico. So I'm assuming FEMA and others are going to have to get involved with Puerto Rico.
They're already involved. They declared an emergency. FEMA is bringing water buffaloes to different housing communities and whatnot. We do have a dilemma. So we are going through the same drought that they're experiencing. We don't have reservoirs, but how it's affecting us is the demand is up. And me and my staff, we got into almost a near argument this morning about whether we curtail the standpipe where the truckers, the haulers are taking water so that we could have
Your
more
pressure has to be at a
inventory.
certain
Yes,
level, right?
yes.
Right, right.
And so there was one school of thought that says it's not going to make a measurable difference. Another school of thought that says we need to do that. Um, there are folks, we have to be mindful. Not everybody's on the water system. So if your system goes dry because it ain't rained in a long time, you need that water holler. I started making the case saying, well, maybe they gotta get well water for now. And we're actually having a real back and forth. We cannot keep up with the demand on the system. People are using the water. The inventory is dropping because it's real hot. The haulers are doing brisk business. I'm making more money than ever on the water business, but I can't keep up with the customer demand right now. And so trying to figure out how do I convince customers to stop buying so much water, stop curtail your water use, which I lose sales and revenues.
Yeah.
But I might have to do that because there's parts of the island where we just can't maintain adequate water pressure. In the last few weeks, we've had a real tough time of it. I'm hoping we all need to be praying for some rain right about now.
Definitely, definitely. And we're in the point of the hurricane season, and I just want to encourage everyone out there to get everything that they need in the eventuality that we are hit for some reason. But we're praying not to be hit by a hurricane. But for most part, just be prepared and be cognizant of what may come. With this water issue or drought, I should say, that's happening throughout the Caribbean at this point in time, also to stock up on your water supplies and just be very cautious about how much water you use as well. We're nearing up to the next 4 minutes, and I think we've had a very, very good, well-rounded discussion or update from you, CEO Knight. And thank you for taking the invitation. I really appreciate it. And I think everyone here who has been listening has gotten a very good update on things with St. John, St. Thomas, and St. Croix. But for most part, if you were to close out and let us know what are some of the important things that you think the authority is going to be working on, but not only that, what are some of the things you'd like to encourage the listening audience to do at home to conserve power? I know at some point in time the authority used to have like these little programs or news article things and telling you what to do, when to plug in, when to plug out. But whatever it is that you want to encourage the listeners in the area of conservation.
Well, so first off, thank you for the time and thank you for giving me an opportunity to chat with you and your constituents. I always welcome opportunity to engage with our customers, and so I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. I do want them to take your message seriously about hurricane preparedness. Now is the time. Get prepared. You got to be able to. I'm gonna do my best to help you, but you got to make sure you do what you can to help yourself, right? WAPA, we will respond. I said on the Senate floor the other day, we've responded to every single storm that has come through these Virgin Islands, and my guys are ready to go, and they will respond again. So people ask, are you prepared? We're never 100% prepared. We're never as prepared as we'd like to be, but we will respond. I do want to encourage people, and that's maybe a whole nother show, but we have gotten away from energy conservation. We have gotten very accustomed to our air conditioning and our nice quality of life. And it's still basic things that we should be doing, turning off those lights. I unplugged my solar water heater, and I haven't run out of hot water yet. I don't spend current. I don't pay for current to heat water, and that's something that's available to most property owners, right? This is basic stuff. We used to know these things, but we have moved away from the things that we learned when power was 50-something cents a kilowatt hour. Everybody figured out every energy conservation tip in the book.
Yeah.
But we have gotten a little lax over time, and I really need people to start to think about how they use power and the things they can do to conserve.
And the authority did do a very good outreach, teaching individuals about the halogen light bulbs versus the regular light bulbs and different things that they can do to try to conserve and the consumption. So I thank the authority for those. And maybe, something you might want to think about again. I know it's less pennies in your pocket in the sense of giving the authority money to pay for its employees and other things that you have to pay for, but conservation is good. I want to make a statement about the Readiness Town Hall, but go ahead with your quick question.
No, thank you, CEO Knight, for that, because I'm gonna unplug going forward.
You're gonna plug your water heater?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
you're taking cold shower.
Yes, 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 yes.
No, I have a solar water heater, so I didn't just
Oh.
unplug. I got solar heater and water.
That's okay. I'm still gonna unplug. Thank you for that tidbit.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Before we close out, I wanted to let everyone know that my office, in coordination with by TEMA, is conducting a hurricane readiness town hall on the island of St. John, so that everyone can get prepared. This is in collaboration with Fire EMS, St. John Rescue, the Department of Health, WAPA, Department of Human Services, Department of Public Works. And the topics are curfews, generator safety, alert VI, shelters that are available on the island, tourist evacuation if necessary, composite poles, and other topics. Those town halls are going to be on September 3rd, 2026. That's a Thursday in the Cleone H. Creaky Legislative Conference Room in Cruz Bay from 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. And on Friday, September 4th, we're going to go out to Coral Bay in the Sprung Shelter. And we'll have the same town hall out there for the residents of the Coral Bay area. I also want to thank WSTX AM 970 for having us. You guys are like the best radio station, but don't tell the rest of them I say so. But thank you, Josh, for all of your being very cordial and professional and letting us use this space to send the message out. So thank you so much, and again, thank you, CEO.
Thank you.
And
Yes,
again,
thank
this
you.
has been the Power to the People radio show. I'm your Senator at Large, Angel Bolques Jr., and we will see you next time. Don't guess, vote Bolques.